Good morning. Veronica, thank you for that beautiful piece. And welcome to all of you to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. I'm the Reverend Lynn Ashley, one of your co-ministers for this interim year. My co-minister, Linda Hottie, wrote these words in their original form, but they seem right. Here, we aspire to welcoming all people to our services, of whatever hue or socioeconomic situation, whatever gender identity or sexual orientation, whatever religious identity, whether you are a seeker just beginning to explore or are pretty sure you know what you believe, whether you come in joy, ready to celebrate life, or come in despair, seeking comfort and new meaning and purpose. We are an open community where you can explore spiritually, where you can encounter new ideas in freedom to choose what seems most true to you. I'm pleased especially this morning to welcome Julius Faulkner to this pulpit. Julius is the TransCare program coordinator at In Our Own Voices, an Albany-based organization which promotes the physical, mental, spiritual, political, cultural, and economic survival and growth of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities of color. Julius is a social worker who creates inclusive spaces which foster acceptance, understanding, and empowerment, and enable community members to embrace their authentic selves and their truth. Julius will be joining us here shortly. Welcome. This morning, thank you, with words from the Thanksgiving address of the Haudenosaunee, who were long ago misnamed the Iroquois. It has been written, the Thanksgiving address has ancient roots dating back over 1,000 years to the formation of the great law of peace by a man known as the peacemaker. And perhaps these words were spoken before that. The address is based on the belief that the world cannot be taken for granted, that a spiritual communication of thankfulness and acknowledgement of all living things must be given to align the minds and hearts of all people with nature and with the works of the Creator. Today, these words are still spoken at the opening and closing of all ceremonial and governmental gatherings held by the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee. As each section of the prayer is completed, I will invite you to repeat the response, which is printed in your orders of service. Now our minds are one. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. We send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun, source of all the fires of life. We give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. Leader of all women on this earth, she governs the movement of the tides. By her changing face, we measure time. We give thanks, too, to the stars who spread like jewels across the sky. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness, helping us when we travel at night to find our way home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send our greetings and thanks to the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now our minds are one. We are thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for supporting our feet as we walk about upon her. She gives us all that we need for life, caring for us as she has from the beginning of time. We are thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. We are thankful, too, to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans, and we know that water is life itself. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the spirits of the earth, air, and water. Please join. And now our minds are one. Now we give thanks to the plants, workers of many wonders and sustainers of many life forms. We honor and thank all the food plants, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries. Since the beginning of time, they have helped the people survive. We honor and thank all the medicine herbs of the world, always waiting and ready to heal us. We honor and thank the trees, providers of shelter and shade, of fruit and beauty and other useful things, symbols of peace and life. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the plants and the trees. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animals. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. We thank all the birds, large and small, singers of beautiful songs who move about and fly above our heads. Each day, they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. We thank all the fishes, too, instructed to cleanse and to purify the waters. They also give themselves to us as food. With one mind, we turn now to all the animals and the birds and the fishes and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to us throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, we turn to them to be reminded of the ways we have been instructed to live together as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. Grateful for all the gifts of creation, we turn our thoughts to the Great Spirit that has provided us with everything we need to live a good life here on this Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. It has not been our intention to leave out anything to which we might want to express gratitude. If something was forgotten, At this time, we leave it to each of you to send greetings and thanks in your own way. Just take a few moments in silence as you do that. And now, our minds are one.
Morning. Morning. And thank you so much for inviting me to your service today. For those I haven't had the pleasure of personally meeting, my name is Julius Faulkner, and I work at an organization called In Our Own Voices as the TransCare program coordinator. My work there supports the survival and growth of the transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary community. And I also happen to be a Black man of transgender experience. Over the course of my personal transition, I often feared not feeling welcomed. I often feared the judgment of others. And most of all, I feared not finding a place where I feel like I could belong. Thankfully, the many experiences of hospitality and invitations of belonging never seems to diminish, and today is a beautiful example of this. Unfortunately, not all of my community can share my experiences. And tomorrow is Transgender Day of Remembrance. This day serves to honor those we have lost because others did not welcome them and they struggled to find a place without superficial judgment. And they could never find a place to welcome them. And this is why I often see my work as my personal calling. I see this as my way to inspire others to embrace their true selves and feel secure in their identity. And most importantly, find places where we can feel secure and a sense of belonging. And in honor of that spirit, I am humbled to join the youth in reading out the names of the trans individuals we have lost over the course of this year. Saying their names will serve as affirmation of belonging, symbolizing that here, at least as a community, we are welcome. I will begin by saying, London Price, Lisa Love, Dominic Dupree, Anae Johnson, and Sherlyn Majorie. I'll invite the next person up, Veronica.
China Long, Luis Angel Diaz Castro, Yoko, Thomas Tom Robertson.
Devani Jure Johnson, Camden Ryder, Jacob Williamson, Chanel Perez Ortiz.
Ashia Davis, Banco Brown, Coco Dadal, and Ashley Burton.
Tisaya Woodland, Tortuguita, Chassé Henderson, Maria Jose Rivera.
Zashi Imanawadehu, Unique Banks, Casey Johnson, Jasmine Starr Mack.
Good morning. My name is Laura Paris, and I serve today as Pastoral Care Associate. Also available today to provide support is Ann Lipinski. here in Community Hall. Today, we will be sharing sorrows and joys in silence by lighting candles and contributing those sorrows and joys that you have written on the cards provided. On this Sunday before the Transgender Day of Remembrance, we honor and remember those who have been named and others not known to us who have died. Those on Zoom wishing to share a sorrow or joy with a Pastoral Care Associate can submit their sorrows and joys in the chat, and they will be saved. Those wishing to light a candle or contribute your written sorrow or joy are now invited to come forward. Take a moment to think of those sorrows and joys that have not been spoken or thought or contributed, but are held in your hearts. I offer this prayer of reflection. These words appear in our AUU World magazine, adapted from a sermon by the Reverend Otto O'Connor, a white, openly transgender man from Canada who now serves First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church in Malden, Massachusetts, called Nurturing Beauty. Beauty is not a distraction from the troubles of the world. We are here not to protect our hearts from breaking, A broken heart is full of beauty. Frederick Buechner said, and he quotes, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid." It's the terrible things that put beauty in sharp relief. My message to you is to allow yourself to see that beauty, to find it, to create it amidst the reality of our world, to treasure its fleetingness and let it go. It's a way to survive. It's an act of rebellion to see this true beauty around us. May it be so.
Our praises call us to explore, and explore we will. Today, in word and song, we celebrate and grieve some the heritage of this nation, a heritage anchored deeply in the story of the first Thanksgiving. Stories of immigrants seeking freedom in strange lands are tales that have been played out throughout all of time and around the globe. The one that we come together to tell again today is worthy of telling and retelling, especially in these challenging times.
When it came to religion, and therefore to politics, those who were known as separatists, the Pilgrims were known as separatists in 17th century England. They were the radical leftists of that day. Not only were they passionately committed to the right of each individual's freedom of conscience when it came to the practice of religion, but they also rejected the notion of the authority of the established church. Thus, they were considered heretics and traitors to the English crown. From its very beginnings, Plymouth Colony, settled in 1620, served as an oasis of pluralism. In their attitude toward others, the Pilgrims were significantly different from the Puritans, who occupied much of the rest of Massachusetts. The Pilgrims offered full rights and privileges of citizenship, regardless of one's personal beliefs, under the terms of the Mayflower Compact, which you will soon hear a little bit of later. The Puritans, on the other hand, were rigidly intolerant. But first, before we go on with the story, take a moment. What of your own ancestors? When did they come to this country? Why? How? How was it for them? Were they welcomed or despised when they came to these shores? And did they welcome those who came after them? What are your family's stories?
In honor of all who set out bravely, seeking the freedom to practice their beliefs, to escape tyranny, or to live out their dreams, and to all who extend compassion to the strangers among us, let us read the Litany for Strangers, which appears on the screen and in your orders of service. We're going to read it antiphonally. Those on this side of the room, join me in reading the words that are in bold print. And for those on this side of the room, please join Fred in reading the italicized words. Pardon me? Oh, there's bold text and italic. Oh, thank you.
The bold
bold.
text is italicized. So there's the regular text, and there's the bolded italic.
Thank you. Do we have
It
it?
takes all of us to do this.
Yes.
We'll get there.
Yes, because, yes. All
Hers
right.
is very different, as you can imagine. There you go.
Thanks. Bold on this side. Italics,
No, other way.
ordinary text on this. Thanks, Jay. We get this. Borne over slate gray waters, by winds caught in tall sails, they came as strangers to the shores of a strange land.
With a strong will and a hopeful heart, they came in search of freedom. They came with a will to worship as they saw fit.
In the woodland heart of this new land, another people flourished, a people with prior claim to the rich loam and the clear springs, the fishes and fowl and vines.
But the first comers lived at peace with earth, not thinking to possess her. To an earth that belonged to herself, they welcomed the pilgrim band as brothers and sisters.
Remembering, we give thanks for hospitable people. We give thanks, too, for the peacemakers of the world.
Our hearts are warmed by the words of ancient stories, laden with praise for those who welcome strangers and offer support in times of stress to those with heavy hearts.
For in every generation, there are those who have come to these shores as strangers.
And in every generation, there were those who scorned us because we were different.
And in every generation, there were those who locked away their possessions and hardened their hearts.
And in every generation, some few glorified mercy and took us in.
So in this season, when earth yields her bounty to all, let us imitate her generosity of spirit.
In this season, when the life-giving sun seems almost to abandon us, let us make up the loss by sharing the warmth of our hearts.
In this season, when we recount our gratitude, let us know that when we give thanks, what we give is love. The voices of pilgrims throughout all of time echo in us, we who are their descendants in mind and body, in spirit. From the depths of their oppression arose our cherished legacy of religious freedom and the sacred texts of this land, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Today, we recall the story of the Pilgrims of Plymouth Plantation and more. Let us hear with new ears their story, which is our story. Will the readers please come forward?
Today, we are reading the words of authors writing in different times than the ones we are in. We acknowledge that the words they chose then might not be what we would choose today. From John F. Hayward. In 1620, our forebears came to the coast of New England to begin a new life. Their names were English, William and Mary Brewster, Miles and Rose Standish, William and Dorothy Bradford, but their cause was worldwide. Theirs was an ancient drama which good people have endured and glorified throughout all time. It remembers long ordeals and wildernesses to which people hastily fled, and provisions ill-suited to enable them to live alone. It tells of the founding of new towns and cities, dwellings of people dedicated to the proposition that all are able, if they are willing, to live together in justice, liberty, and a fullness of life.
From William Bradford's History of Plymouth Plantation. In England in the early 17th century, the Pilgrims could not long continue in any peaceable condition, but were hunted and persecuted on every side. Some were taken and clapped up in prison. Others had their houses beset and watched night and day. The most were fain to flee and leave their houses and habitations and the means of their livelihood. Yet seeing themselves thus molested and that there was no hope for their continuance, in England, by joint consent, they resolved to go to the Low Countries, to Holland, where they heard was freedom of religion for all.
William Bradford remembers the reasoning that helped the Pilgrims to seize upon their own courage and to go forth from Holland. It was answered that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties and must be both enterprised and overcome with answerable courages. It was granted the dangers were great, but not desperate. The difficulties were many, but not invincible. And all of them, through the help of God, might either be borne or overcome.
In September 1620, under the jurisdiction of the Virginia Company, 102 persons set out on the Mayflower bound for the northern parts of Virginia. Not all were pilgrims from the Dutch city of Leyden. Some were from London. All were seeking religious freedom. All were adventurers, whether of God or of gain. On November 11th, they cast anchor off Provincetown on the tip of Cape Cod. The gales of winter had blown them off course, driving them into the Massachusetts cold. When it appeared that they would have to land at Plymouth and settle in an unknown territory, rather than under the rule of the Virginia Company, they were obliged to establish their own government, lest they perish by division and die in the wilderness from lack of civil law. Thereupon they drew up the Mayflower Compact, the first seed of democracy sown in the New World.
From the Mayflower Compact. In the name of God, amen. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subject of our dread sovereign Lord, King James, having undertaken for the glory of God and the advancements of the Christian faith, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one of another, covenant and combine ourselves together in a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices, from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunder subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, Anno Domini 1620.
The Pilgrims' greatest enemies that first winter were famine and sickness. Bradford wrote, thank you. So there died sometimes 2 or 3 a day, and of 100 and odd persons, scarce 50 remained. And of these, in the time of most distress, there was but 6 or 7 sound persons, who, to their great commendations, spared no pains night or day, but with abundance of toil and hazard of their own health, fetched the others wood, made them fires, dressed their meat, made their beds, washed their loathsome clothes, clothed and unclothed them, in a word, did all the homely and necessary offices for them which dainty and queasy stomachs cannot endure. And all this willingly and cheerfully, without any grudging in the least, showing herein their true love unto their friends and brethren, a rare example and worthy to be remembered.
Howard Berman, a rabbi who served as affiliated clergy at Arlington Street Church in Boston, wrote that one of the most misunderstood aspects of Pilgrim history is the relationship of the original generation of Mayflower settlers and the Native Americans they lived among. For the most part, he argues, it was characterized by mutual respect and trust, with treaties and cooperations that were honored until later generations of New England colonists broke and betrayed them.
From Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. For the most part, Berman wrote, there was mutual respect and trust. But the historian Howard Zinn reminds us, when the Pilgrims came to New England, they came not to vacant land, but to territory inhabited by tribes of Indians. The governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, created the excuse to take Indian land by declaring the area legally a vacuum. The Indians, he said, had not subdued the land and therefore only had a natural right to it, but not a civil right. A natural right did not have legal standing.
From Bradford's Plymouth Plantation, and so eventually the Pilgrims and the natives fought. William Bradford described a raid on a Pequot Indian village. Those that escaped the fire were slain with the sword, some cut to pieces, others run through with their rapiers.
We said of our Pilgrim forebears just minutes ago, theirs was an ancient drama which good people have endured and glorified throughout all time. It remembers long ordeals in wildernesses to which people hastily fled. It has been said that those whom the Pilgrims found already on this land were but savages in the wilderness. But really, who were those first people, those first comers?
From Howard Zinn. Widely dispersed over the great land mass of the Americas, they numbered perhaps 25 million in North America. Responding to the different environments of soil and climate, they developed hundreds of different tribal cultures, perhaps 2,000 different languages. They perfected the art of agriculture and figured out how to grow maize, which must be planted, cultivated, fertilized, harvested, husked, shelled. They ingeniously developed a variety of other vegetables and fruits, as well as peanuts and chocolate and tobacco and rubber.
From the Adirondacks to the Great Lakes lived the most powerful of the northeastern tribes, the League of Iroquois. The Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse. Their alliance included the Mohawks, people of the Flint, the Oneidas, people of the Stone, the Onondagas, people of the Mountain, the Cayugas, people of the Landing, and the Senecas, the Great Hill people. Thousands of people bound together by a common language. Thousands bound by a covenant which read, "We bind ourselves together by taking hold of each other's hands so firmly and forming a circle so strong that if a tree shall fall upon it, it could not shake nor break it, so that our people and grandchildren shall remain in the circle in security, peace, and happiness."
There were those who came to these shores, but not of their own choosing, and they were here long before the Pilgrims. These were people who had endured long voyages into their own wildernesses. Here's soon the tale of the arrival of the first ship in North America, in 1619, 1 year before the Mayflower came to these shores.
Sails furled, flag drooping at her rounded stern, she rode the tide in from the sea. She was a strange ship indeed, by all accounts, a frightening ship, a ship of mystery. Whether she was trader, privateer, or man o' war, no one knows. Through her bulwarks black-mounted canyon yawned. The flag she flew was Dutch, her crew a motley one. Her port of call, an English settlement, Jamestown, in the colony of Virginia. She came, she traded, and shortly afterwards was gone. Probably no ship in modern history has carried a more portentous freight. Her cargo, 20 slaves.
The conditions of capture and sale were crushing affirmations to the Black African of helplessness in the face of force. The marches to the coast of Africa, sometimes for 1,000 miles, with people shackled around the neck under whip and gun, were death marches, in which 2 of every 5 Africans died. On the coast, they were kept in cages until they were picked and sold. One Judge John Barbow, at the end of the 17th century, described these cages on the Gold Coast.
From John Barbout and Howard Zinn. As the slaves come down to Fidda from the inland country, they are put into a booth or prison near the beach, and when Europeans are to receive them, they are brought out onto a large plain where the ship's surgeons examine every part of every one of them to the smallest member, men and women being stark naked. Such as are allowed good and sound are, marked on the breast with a red-hot iron, imprinting the mark of the French, English, or Dutch companies. The branded slaves after this are returned to their former booths where they await shipment. Then they were packed aboard the slave ships in spaces not much bigger than coffins, chained together in dark, wet slime of the ship's bottom, choking in the stench of their own excrement.
And there were the immigrants, those who came by choice, seeking a better life. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, waves of Irish and Welsh, Germans, Asians, and Eastern European came to this land. What is Ellis Island like? Wrote Theodore Lubeck, a Ukrainian immigrant. It was hell and it was good. For one who passed by, everything was all right. For one who was detained or sent back, oh, that was awful. But then the doors were closed to some. In the early 20th century, limits were imposed, especially on Eastern and Southern Europeans. But then in 1965, the doors were reopened and the ethnic makeup of this country has changed.
From Lyndon Baines Johnson. Hear these words from President Lyndon Johnson, who spoke at the signing of the Immigration Act of 1965 on Liberty Island. This bill that we signed today is not a revolutionary bill, yet it is still one of the most important acts of this Congress and of this administration, for it does repair a very deep and painful flaw in the fabric of American justice. It corrects a cruel and enduring wrong in the conduct of the American nation. This bill says simply that from this day forth, those wishing to immigrate to America shall be admitted on the basis of their skills and their close relationship to those already here. He continued, under the old system, only 3 countries were allowed to supply 70% of all the immigrants. Families were kept apart because a husband or a wife or a child had been born in the wrong place. Men of needed skill and talent were denied entrance because they came from Southern or Eastern Europe or from one of the developing continents. It has been un-American in the highest sense because it has been untrue to the faith that brought thousands to these shores even before we were a country.
Contrary to Lyndon Johnson's statement at its signing, the effect of the Immigration Act of 1965 has indeed been revolutionary. It was to change the face of the nation. The tolerance of religious difference that is the legacy of our Pilgrim forebearers has been challenged mightily as Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists have joined Christians, Jews, and natives in the practice of their respective faiths. The tolerance of ethnic and racial difference has been challenged mightily as those who clamor to build walls across our borders. There are laws, they want laws to make it a crime not to carry immigration papers, an open invitation for harassment and discrimination against people, regardless of their citizenship status. We struggle to find our way as a nation that we might live into the dream that many among us dream, a dream of creating beloved community.
From John Hayward, following upon the horrors of the Pilgrims' first winter, the spring and the natives were kind. The Pilgrims were encouraged to plant several crops in considerable volume. In the fall, Bradford wrote, "Our harvest has been gotten in. Our governor sent 4 men out fowling so that we might, after more special manner, rejoice together after we had gathered the fruit of our labors. At which time, many of the Indians came amongst us, and amongst them their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted."
From Nathaniel Philbrick, Mayflower. Countless Victorian-era engravings notwithstanding, the Pilgrims did not spend the day sitting around a long table draped with a white linen cloth, clasping each other's hands in prayer as a few curious Indians looked on. Instead of an English affair, the first Thanksgiving soon became an overwhelmingly native celebration when Massasoit and 100 Pocahontas, more than twice the entire English population of Plymouth, arrived at the settlement and soon provided 5 freshly killed deer. In addition to ducks and deer, there was, according to Bradford, a good store of wild turkeys in the fall of 1621. The Pilgrims may have also added fish. In fall, striped bass, bluefish, and cod were abundant. Perhaps most important to the Pilgrims was that with the recently harvested barley crop, it was now possible to brew beer. Alas, the Pilgrims were without pumpkin pies or cranberry sauce. There were also no forks, which did not appear at Plymouth until the last decade of the 17th century. The Pilgrims ate with their fingers and their knives.
Amen. In celebrating Thanksgiving, we give thanks for those pilgrims from every land and every age unto this day. We acknowledge that we and all those who have made this nation have come from many places, from Asia across a land bridge 25,000 years ago and more, seeking warmth, from the slave ships and plantations of old America, from England and Holland to Plymouth, from the tenements and ghettos of Europe, from Mexico, from Iraq and Iran, and from Cambodia and Myanmar, from Vietnam, Somalia, and Bosnia, from South and Central America. So many have come with hope for finding a kinder future. And still the people come. At Liberty Island in 1965, President Johnson continued, "Our beautiful America was built by a nation of strangers. From 100 different places or more, they have poured forth into this land, joining and blending in one mighty and irresistible tide. The land flourished because it was fed from so many sources, because it was nourished by so many cultures and traditions and peoples. May it be so once again."
These words are from the Pueblos of New Mexico. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to the promise, even if it is sometimes marred. Hold on to life, even if it is sometimes easier letting go. And hold on to the hand of your neighbor, even when we are apart.